Welcome, everyone, to another exciting edition of the Domo Lunch and Learns every Tuesday and Thursday right here, wherever you consume your social media. Today, we are broadcasting over YouTube, and I am joined by another fan favorite on these Lunch and Learns, Dan Hendrickson, our Director of Business Strategy and Growth here at Domo. He's got a really exciting topic. We're going to discuss variables today and dynamically changing cards titles, dynamically changing values in columns, a lot of dynamic text stuff. Just an exciting topic, I think, for a lot of folks out there that might be interested in variables. I know it's always a hot topic when we talk about variables in the community. So definitely something that we're excited to have Dan here for today. But before we get started with Dan, as always, I have some announcements, just one today. If you haven't yet, we are fastly approaching Domopalooza, and in coordination with Domopalooza, we are asking for nominations for the first of its kind, the first ever Domo Community Ovation Awards. We really love celebrating you, and this is a fantastic opportunity to get your name as part of our very first Ovation Award winners. We are going to be hosting a chef event, virtual chef event, where we're actually going to send some kits out and do some exciting stuff for the awards ceremony. So we're super excited. If you haven't nominated anyone yet, consider nominating yourself. It's okay to be a little selfish. Nominate yourself, whether you've made a novel application or you use Domo everywhere, you've had a business impact in some way. There are over 11 categories. So you will definitely find something that you might be able to fit into, or again, nominate somebody that's working next to you that's made an impact in Domo at your business. So super excited to do those. Those are just something fun that we're doing this year, something brand new. Always want to make sure I get that in before we toss it over to our exciting guest here, Dan Hendrickson, again, the Director at Domo for Business Strategy and Growth. How's it going, Dan? You feeling good today?
Eddie, I'm feeling great. Yeah, I'm looking forward to my nomination, by the way, as well.
Well, that's great. At some point, we'll have you load one of those guitars up and maybe get a little, musical introduction to your topic. We're going to talk variables today, right?
That's what we're going to talk about. Yeah, I'm super stoked.
Awesome. Exciting. Well, I'm going to let you get to it. I'll get out of the way. He's got a lot of deep dive stuff. Remember, these live streams are specifically for those folks that are interested in maybe some interesting use cases, some technical deep dives. So that's exactly the topics that we cover every Tuesday and Thursday. And again, excited, Dan, that you've been thrilled to join us over the last few, and we're excited to have you again.
Yeah, I'm super happy to be here, and hoping we get some interactivity here. Variables has been super exciting for me as a heavy Domo user. So today, I really just want to talk about what they are, share some of the powerful use cases that are unlocked using them. But most importantly, I want to show everybody here watching how to use them yourself, right? The good news is it's not that hard, and we'll cover it all today. But before we jump in to variables and start looking at data, let's talk through some questions that you as a Domo user have likely either asked or been asked. I know that I've been on both sides of just about all of these, and it's things like, what if we slice this differently? Or what if we change the time period? Can I see it rolled up by category instead of brand? Or can the different media channels be grouped together by category or delivery method? How will this change affect the bottom line, inventory turnover, quota attainment, etc.? So for analysts and card builders, it's truly impossible to predict every question from decision makers and inefficient to guess at every card to build, right? But this is the way that data teams interface with their consumers. There's a ton of back and forth, creates friction, delays, miscommunications, and errors. Now, Domo does a good job at addressing this with the low barrier to entry on content creation, but we all know there's still huge audiences that need the content created for them. Leveraging variables unlocks a better way to deliver insights and empower decision makers to ask and answer any questions without anyone having to build new content for them in Domo. With variables, cards and dashboards become dynamic data experiences that allow decision makers to surface new insights on the fly without relying on analysts or the BI team. So let's jump in and look at some examples here really quick. What if analysis? This is a huge one, right? what you're seeing here in this example, and it's worth noting too, the content that I'm showing you today is in an instance that we've got called Domo-dojo.domo.com. If you're a Domo customer, reach out to your CSM. This is a public instance. You can get access to it. So you yourself can go play around with this exact page that we're going to look at today. But this what-if analysis is a really cool and popular unlock using variables. And the idea here is we input a margin goal, right? So I can put in whatever value I want here, and you'll see that plotted here on the chart. But in this case, we've got a goal of maintaining a 40% margin for our vendors. And we've got a few different levers that we can pull that affect that margin, right? We can adjust how big of a discount we're going to give in our advertising. We can adjust what we're attributing to shipping costs, right? Let's say that we know we're facing rising shipping costs. What can we do with our advertising percentage, and what kind of inflation are we looking at seeing from our vendors, right? If I drop these inflation points down, you can see how all of the different levers that I'm pulling are affecting the values visualized in all these cards, right? So let's take a second and look at exactly how that happens, right? I'm going to start by opening up this vendor margin percentage card in the analyzer. Now, one thing I want to point out, all of these values plotted are beast modes, they're calculated fields, right? We know that because we've got the little equal sign there. And so let's take a look at the simplest one here, right? Margin percent goal. Let's see, margin percent goal. So the green, as you know it, are beast modes. The purple or the pink are variables. So let's take a look at this first beast mode, and you can see this simply is displaying a variable, right? And we know it's a variable because it's in pink. So the calculated field margin percent goal is displaying the variable margin percent goal input. Now, if you haven't seen it in the beast mode editor for the last few months, we've got this variables section, and let's take a look at the margin percent goal input variable. I've got a bunch of them here. So I'm going to search for margin percent. Here we go. And I'm going to click the little pencil here. Now, you can see that this variable, margin percent goal input, we've set this variable to be a number, right? You've got a few different values or types of values that you can set here. And we'll look at different examples of those throughout the presentation today. But we've got a number, we've given it a default value of 45. And we've indicated that we want it to be controlled. The variable will be controlled through a text box input. And you saw this on the dashboard. I'll show it to you on the card here as well. But we can see a preview what that looks like, and we indicate how we want it formatted, right? Is it a number? Is it money? Or is it a percentage? We've got a few different controls that we can prescribe, and we'll look at some examples of those in just a moment. But the idea, we've got a text box, we can put a number in, it formats it as a percentage, and that is then what drives this beast mode. So I've got we'll close without saving. I do have the controls turned on here. You can see up in this little tray at the top, controls is a thing you can turn on. You can see my different variables here, but this is our input text box. And you can see as I change that number, let's change it to 50. The margin percent goal updates and is plotted there at 50 because that is a beast mode that's just driven by that variable. All right, sounds pretty straightforward. Let's take a look at this CJ vendor margin percent. We've got a little bit more going on there. CJ vendor margin percent. Okay, here we go. So I want to focus, I don't want to focus on the mathematical equations being performed here, but I want to focus on the number of different variables that are being included in the calculation, right? So we've got this advertising percent off, right? We can see a couple of times in here, we're taking a whole number of 1 and we're subtracting advertising percent off. Again, we know that's a variable because it's here in the pink. Let's look at that variable really quick. Advertising percent off. There we go. So in this case, this is also a number and it's a percentage, but the control that we've prescribed here is radio options. Radio options allow you to make a singular selection, and we've indicated what values we want to be available here. You can add or remove as many of these as you want to. And we've checked that we want to add this control to analyze. That's why it shows up there on the page. So advertising percent off is one of the variables driven there. We've also got CJ vendor inflation. Let's take a look at that one. CJ vendor inflation, again, it's another number, it's a percentage. This one is an input and a slider, right? So we give you a lot of flexibility in what you can do here. But the slider basically saying, hey, I can drag this little bubble along this line. We allow you to prescribe a minimum and maximum, right? So the variable can't exceed 50, can't go lower than 0, and the steps are in 0.5% increments, right? So give you a lot of input, and with it being input plus slider, that also means we can just type a number in here, right? So we've got the slider. And we've also got an input field. So a cool use of that there. And then lastly, let's look at the third variable that we've got incorporated in this calculated field. And that's variable shipping cost. So we'll pull that one up here. Variable shipping cost. Variable shipping cost, also a number. All the ones we're looking at in this example are numbers. This is a drop down. It's currency. And you can see we've assigned the different values we wanted to there. If we want to, we could add, any value that we want. And just like that, it's available in the drop down. I'm going to remove it to preserve what we've got here. But that's what a couple of those look like here inside the analyzer, right? So variables live inside of beast mode, and then they can be displayed here on the actual card. So that same interaction you saw on the dashboard is available right here on the card, either in Analyzer or in the card's view. Now, I want to exit that and look at the dashboard again here for a second. You saw, obviously, there's these values up here that were adjusted, but I want to talk about how we get the variable controls right here on the dashboard, right? As great as it is to be able to go into a card and have those variables here, having it on the dashboard is really neat and unlocks some cool functionality. So the way that this works, I'll edit the dashboard really quick, is you have this little, looks like a couple of switches, I guess, but control, and it allows you to drag and drop controls onto the dashboard. We'll put one right here, just for fun, right? Add content. I've actually got all my variables leveraged, but you could insert a variable there. So that's what we've done is we've dragged those controls over. We'll edit one to show you. So we've chosen our control. We've decided that we do want to show the title, but not the description. And you just choose which variable you want to be displayed there. So that allows you to take those variable controls outside of the card and display them right on the dashboard to make it really simple and really slick and really interactive for your users. So Whatif Analysis, I wanted to start with that one. It's one that comes up a lot, and it's one that's fairly easy to show how variables can be factored into calculations and how you can play around with some of these numbers to see how it affects different things. Now, I want to take a look now at dynamic category performance. Now, in the last example that we looked at, everything we talked about was numbers, right? We changed these inflation percentages, we changed shipping cost, we changed a goal that was a percentage, advertising percent, they're all numbers. On this dynamic category performance, we're taking a look at not numbers, but rather strings or values, right? So you can see here, I've actually got some variable controls and I've also got some filter controls. let me show you something really cool here. Right now, we're displaying sales by region. And so our metric is sales and our dimension is region, right? Well, in our example we talked about, people all the time say, well, hey, I don't want to see it by region. I want to see it by state, city, brand, category, department, right? Let's say that we want to look at it by brand, right? And now just like that, my chart's updated. The title changed, right? We're seeing that it's sales by brand. The values plotted on the x-axis changed on both of these charts here. And even up here, we've got changes to these values, right? So if I say, hey, instead of sales, I'm not interested in the dollars, but I want to see the volume of orders for each of these brands, right? Now, in addition to changing what we've got on the x-axis, which I did here, we've now changed what we've got on the y-axis, right? So instead of seeing a sum of revenue, we're seeing a count of orders. You'll notice that the chart, titles also updated, right? Instead of being sales by brand, it's now orders by brand. And that happened across all of our different hero metrics up here as well. Orders or sales is now orders, and so on and so forth. Now, these two are filters, and there's some cool things that we can do here that I'll show you. Let's say that I only want to look at footwear, right? So now it filters it to just my footwear brands, but it also updated my card titles, right? So I know as I'm looking at this that I'm actually looking at footwear orders by brand, right? Or if I want to switch to units, right, I can see footwear units by brand. So not only are the charts updating to give me the values I'm after, but the titles of the content are changing. And we can layer those in there as well. If I click on California, we can now see that it's footwear California units by brand. Super, super, super cool stuff. So I want to show you exactly how we did that. And let's do that by, firstly, I'm going to reset all of these. So we'll peel these filters off, and we'll go back to just our default view, sales by region. And I want to jump into the analyzer and show you how we built this card. And the first thing I want to show you is this sales by region. This is where some of this dynamic text come in. But you can see that the card title is all leveraging smart text, right? So the way you saw those filter values get added to the title and the name of the card changed is by having those titles be driven by those variables and those filters. So you can see here, we're displaying any filter, right? We don't have any default text prescribed, but we're instructing it that we want to display any filter. We could choose certain filters if we wanted to, but we're displaying any filter. And then we're also choosing the metric. We've got X metric, which is what we called it, and dimension, choose dimension. So choose metric, choose dimension. Those are the variables that we're displaying in the title, right? We've also done some neat things with the description where we're dynamically including the data set name, the time and date the data set was last updated, and the date range that's displayed in the card. All right, so some very cool things. And you've got a preview out here that you can see, but leverage these in the card titles because it makes it that much more intuitive for your users. Now, I want to take a look at the values that we're plotting again. And like I'm sure you guessed, these are both beast modes, right? I'll say it again in case it didn't land the first time, but variables are really only used inside of beast modes, right? So every time that you've got a variable in use, there's going to be a beast mode that coincides with that. But let's take a look at BM dimension. That's what we're plotting here on the x-axis. And in this case, BM dimension is a case statement. I use this a lot personally in the content that I've got in Domo, but we've got a case statement here that is evaluating a variable called choose dimension, right? Again, we know it's a variable because it's pink. And this case statement is just evaluating that variable for different values, and then it's passing a different column into this new calculated field, right? So you can see over here, we've got a region column, We've got a state column and a city column and a brand column. Those columns all exist. And by evaluating this variable, we're allowing it to dynamically choose which value is displayed. Let's take a look at the choose dimension variable. Choose dimension. All right. So in this case, we've got text, right? The last examples that we looked at were all numbers. This is text. We've assigned it a default value of region. We've selected this to be a drop-down as well. And you can see a preview of what that looks like. And again, the ability to add different values that are displayed there. So that's what we've got here on the x-axis. If you look at the y-axis, it's really the same thing, right? The difference here being we've called this one BM for beast mode metric. And same thing, it's a case statement. It's evaluating different metrics, sales, units, and orders. And then based on which is chosen in that variable, it's summing that column. And so fairly straightforward here, right? We don't need to dive into this choose metric variable because it's just like the last one. It's just a drop down with sales, units, and orders. And again, you can see them displayed here. What I really like is how filters are used in conjunction with this. So you've got our variables, but also our filters, right? That was how we quickly, filtered it down to just a certain brand. And again, you can see the card title updating there. I love when I build content in Domo. I love this analyzer and how it lets me see exactly what I'm doing, interact with what I'm working on, so that I know exactly how it's going to look and perform for my users. Let's exit out of this really quick. So cool example there on category performance. Again, we've got the dynamic text. We've got variable controls here on the dashboard. We've got filter controls. We've got those interacting with the card titles. We've also got some dynamic text. This gets used a lot in text or notebook cards, right? You can see if I come in here, we've got this smart text button, and I can add all sorts of things, right? I can show dates, I can show filters, variables, segments, data set info. That's a really common one. You can see here, we're leveraging that to say, hey, here's the data set name, here's when it updated. And we've got a couple of different data sets there, right? Transaction product sales and pricing product sales and when they updated. So a cool way to surface that right at the dashboard level without the user having to go into the card details and look for that information hidden down here in the corner. Let's look at another example here really quick. I really like this. It's similar to what we just showed above, but this is in a pivot table, right? We get people oftentimes that want to be able to expand and collapse and all the different things that we love with pivot tables, which they do well, right? So that's just functionality that's baked in. But again, the ability here to say, hey, you know what? I actually want to group it instead of by brand. You can see we've got Apple, Under Armour, Dell, New Balance. I want to group it by category, right? Pivot table changes to see category. And then again, we've got for our rows, we've got a couple of them here. We've got region, and then we've got state. But I may want to see that by category, and then by department, right? So again, the ability to just easily change those, and then lastly, the metric, right? So default, we're looking at sales. I can look at units, anything that I want to. Let's jump in the analyzer to show you that really quick. But I think it's what you all expected. Again, calculated fields here. And those are really just driven by these variable controls, the drop downs, and then the filter, right? So just a little bit different view on what we just showed in the category performance. But a fun one. We see a lot of table cards getting used. I'm going to clear out some of these selections here to get my my values up at the top. It drives me crazy when I've got a bunch in here. So give me just a second to clear those. Perfect. Time comparisons. This is a super, super cool one, in my opinion. We know that it's really common to try to evaluate performance of different things over time. Domo does a really good job of allowing a user to select, this quarter, last month, next month. I like how the team has incorporated variables in here. Excuse me. In this example, got to get a drink really quick. 1 second. Sorry about that. In this example, we've got a dimension that we can change, right? And this is the x-axis. So again, if I want to look at it by brand, we can do that. You can see now it's Apple, Dell, New Balance, whatever. The neat thing here is this time range, right? So I say, hey, you know what? I actually want to look at month to date. And you can see that my title and whatnot changes, my period comparison here. But I actually don't want to look at this month versus February of last year. I want to look at, and you can change it year over year or period over period, right? Period over period, evaluating February against January, because it's a monthly period. And then also this toggle to say, hey, do we want to include today? Yes or no. All right, so this is kind of a fun one. I'm going to jump in here. And again, all of these being calculated fields, how we're choosing what's displayed there. But let's take a look at a couple of these. Let's look at the sum of current time range. So the way that when I first looked at this, I thought, man, that's really cool. This one is a fairly involved nested case statement, right? But what's really neat is we're evaluating, hey, do we want today to be included, right? And again, that's a variable, right? If we look at that, this is another example of a different type of control. In this case, we've got pills, right? Include today, yes or no. We got a default value here, but this is going through and it's using Beast Mode's native date functions, right, to determine whether or not values should be passed if they fit in the time frame prescribed, and also looking at at quarters, months, weeks, those sorts of things. So cool and creative example. Kudos to the team for thinking through that and putting together that ability to simply grab different time ranges and whatnot. And then the last, well, I guess I got two more examples for you. This custom time range one here, pretty neat. It allows you to prescribe a start and end date for each of these, right? And you've got your comparison period 1 and your comparison period 2. So you can see here, I'm comparing January 1st, 2022 to 12/31/2022 with the same time period in 2021. Now, I've chose these to be calendars, right? And we can take a look at that. But if I want to, as a user, quickly compare Q1 of 2022 against Q2 of 2022, right? This is historically, and we'll just type the date in here. This is historically a more difficult effort, right? We'll go with June 30th, 2022. But using variables, right, I can easily key in my start and end dates for my different periods. I see my sales for range 1 or period 1 were 632 million, period 2, 661, and I've got the difference calculated here, right? So if we take a look at these, you can see that our values, BM date range, here's the one that we're using here, is simply evaluating via a case statement our start and end date, and it's just saying, hey, when the order date is in between these two dates, then pass the sales field. Otherwise, give me a 0, right? So it allows me to easily just choose which date ranges the values are going to be summed up for, and then diff, same thing, calculated there with a beast mode. The last example that I'll show you here is this support calls, UTC. It's kind of a cool thing, right? This was driven by a real example of understanding where our support calls come in from, what time they come in, and understanding staffing at different regional locations, how that might affect when we need those people in that location to be available to pick up the phone, right? So here you can see, not too exciting, both these cards show the exact same thing, right? It shows me the hour of the day and the volume of calls that come in, but that's in UTC, right? So if we say, hey, we're going to locate this call center in California, right? So if I look at Pacific, now it tells me that I'm going to need to find folks in California that can work from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m., right? What if I want it on the U.S. East Coast, right? Well, now I need people that can work from midnight to 8. Obviously, these examples are pretty straightforward. We didn't get too creative in how we ventured out and calculated these. We just put the 4 time zones that we deal with here in North America. But as you can think through all the different time zones around the world and whatnot that goes into that, really, really cool ability to just see side-by-side comparison of how operating a facility like that in a different time zone could affect when you need to have folks available to be able to answer those phone calls. Now, again, those are the examples that I've got here for you. I would encourage you, if you're a Domo customer, reach out to your CSM, ask them for access to this environment, to this instance. Again, it's called Domo-Dojo. Get in there, play around with this. Hopefully these examples were helpful for you. I look forward to seeing all the different cool things that you guys put together and seeing those shared in the community. We do have links to an intro video that's got a little higher production quality than my little presentation here today, as well as links to the Domo knowledge base and some of those other assets. So as you get in there and you're playing around with it, we've got some really robust documentation around it. Hopefully the little intro we went through here today, served to whet your appetite a little bit, help you understand what's possible, and really gets the gears turning for you.
Dan, we did have a great session, by the way. We did have a question come through from our friend BVK, Brian Van Kampen. Can you make those custom date ranges dynamic? Like start date is 1/1/2023 and the end date is today? ?
Yeah. So the cool thing, Brian, BVK, as Eddie called you, the cool thing about these is it's really handled in the beast mode, right? So however fancy you want to get with your logic, right? If you want to, we looked at those case statement examples, and if you want to allow something like today, right, you can evaluate that in the beast mode and pass whatever values through to those calculations that you want to. So, I think the answer there is yes.
Awesome. That was the only sole question that came through for this entire section, Dan. That's how great you did, as we always say.
I don't know if it means I was good or maybe I put everybody to sleep, right? We'll go with yours.
No, variables is such a hot topic. So I appreciate that you kind of raised your hand on this one. It was absolutely fantastic. We obviously appreciate everyone joining us, whether you're watching live or you're watching this on demand. And if you ever have any questions, you can email me at Domo or pass on any very specific and more complicated questions to my friend Dan, because he's the guy. I appreciate you guys so much. Thanks for watching. We will catch you on the next Domo Lunch and Learn next Tuesday, coming up on your calendar. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.